Broussard.
We'll have more on that Cleveland Aquarium, dig into who really is the star down there. But first, let's have Nick give out some NBA medals. Celtics continued their run through the state of Florida last night, beat the Heat after beating Orlando on must-win Wednesday. Jaylen Brown led the Celtics with 17, but just missed out on the medal. Nick, which three guys made your podium today?
Good win for the Celtics, and really good to see Brown and Tate Mark's criticisms to heart as they combined for, let me check, 4 assists total between the two. All right, bronze medal, Devin Booker. Phoenix Suns have been somewhat underwhelming this year, but hey, everyone gets to play the Rockets. Good for you. 27-9-5 for D-Book in a win over the Rockets, which I'm sure this morning is the biggest story surrounding the Suns basketball team, top to bottom, ownership included. Silver medal, Jordan Clarkson. He had a nice, I don't know if it's in the highlights, but a great little mix in the corner. Jordan Clarkson, reigning 6th man of the year. He has given himself the permanent green light his whole career. He's found a nice home in Utah. 34-3 for Clarkson in a win over, that should say the Hawks, but you know what? They played so poorly yesterday, they're just the Hawks. All right, and the gold medal, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, pardon me. SGA is what I'm going to call him because he has overtaken OG Anunoby as the great player or very good player whose name I simply butcher every time. It wasn't a great shot he took, but it was a dagger that he took. Up 3, minute and a half left, 16 on the shot clock. Let me just pull from the logo as the Thunder. Hey, the Thunder on pace to go 82-0 if all 82 games are against the Lakers without LeBron. The Thunder get their second win of the year.
Great.
There it is, Broussard, your podium from last night in the association.
A couple things you missed, Nick. One, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Also, he is becoming the poster boy for bringing back the John Stockton short shorts. So that's something you failed to mention. But look at that. I mean, he's becoming the lead guy in this. Secondly, what did Seth Curry do to you? What did Seth Curry do? Like,
I like
Seth Curry, 23, 22, 23. The Sixers are rolling. 5 straight wins without Ben Simmons and Embiid's missing here and there. Seth, I'm just saying, consider Seth.
I like Seth, but who are we bumping off?
But you're right, this 3 is legit. But in the future, just consider Seth. That's all I'm saying. You haven't even considered.
All right, let's get back to some football. Speaking of weird and slightly wonderful, Cleveland, the latest going on there with the Browns. They're reportedly expected to release star receiver Odell Beckham Jr. today. This was only Odell's 3rd season in Cleveland, but plenty of evidence put on tape during those 3 years that the connection between Odell and Baker has not worked, isn't going to work, will no longer work now or seemingly ever. So, Nick, who will be better off after this split, this divorce, Baker or Odell?
Well, in the short term, I think it will absolutely unequivocally be Odell. Assuming he does get to pick his team, he's going to pick a team with a good quarterback, and he's going to look awesome. And you can go ahead and throw this in the life isn't fair bucket because Odell clearly has not, I would argue, handled forcing his way out of Cleveland in the most professional manner imaginable. He did it at a really bad time. He did it kind of passive-aggressively, I would imagine, with his dad and with LeBron kind of doing it for him so his hands can stay clean, even though they're not really clean. But I think it's going to work out great for him, Broussard. And I've used the comp many times. Randy, who I think is the 2nd greatest receiver ever, was dogging it in Oakland.
Agreed.
Just wanted out of there. Got out of there and ended up having a resurgence that led to the greatest season a wide receiver has ever had, or maybe the 2nd greatest. Rice did have 20 touchdowns in a strike-shortened year, but one of the 2 greatest wide receiver seasons ever. So listen, it's not always fair, but I think that the Browns are going to miss the playoffs this year. I think the Browns are in real trouble, and I think the Browns have a real tough decision coming up with Baker. And I think Odell's going to end up with a Pro Bowl or MVP caliber quarterback and be making plays in the postseason. So I think it's going to work out much better for Odell, at least in the short term.
Okay, you may be right in the short term, and I'll get back to this, but let me address Baker first. I think it's Baker Mayfield overall because Baker Mayfield's future, long term, I believe, is brighter. He's still got his own team. Even if the Browns don't sign him to the long-term contract after this season, they'll franchise him. He'll still have 3 years, 2-3 years to still prove himself. And he has proven that he can win without OBJ. And he's got the great running game, the great offensive line, and still some good receivers. So I still think long-term it's Baker. I do agree with you that OBJ could have some moments. If he goes to the Chiefs, even as the third option, and they turn things around, get deep in the playoffs, he's making a touchdown here or there. Like, it'll look good for him. If he goes to a team that wins a Super Bowl and catches a couple touchdowns in the playoffs, makes a few big plays, kind of like Antonio Brown last year with Tampa Bay, that will look good for him. He'll be redeemed. But, and I don't hate your Randy Moss comp, Nick, but there are a lot of differences. Like, I don't think Odell will ever get back to being that top 5 receiver in the league. What we saw his first 3 years in New York with the Giants. And here's why I differentiate between him and Randy Moss. Number one, Randy Moss has some things going for him that OBJ doesn't. Randy Moss was 6'4", just unique, with 4.2 speed. World-class speed.
Of course.
Odell's 5'11", ran a 4.4 at his best. Does he still run a 4.4? I don't know. Okay, so he didn't have those just freakish things about him that Randy Moss did. Secondly, Randy Moss, even in his down years, was not injured. He was just, as you said, dogging it. Too. Whereas OBJ has had significant physical injuries that he might not be, probably isn't what he was physically. Thirdly, Randy Moss went to the GOAT. I mean, he went to Tom Brady, all right? OBJ, he became the first option in New England. If OBJ goes to a guy I've said, and I'm sure you believe has GOAT potential in Pat Mahomes, he's going to be the third option. And so if he goes to Green Bay,
he's the second option.
He's the second. Right, yeah, at best.
That's right. That's true.
I think I don't hate your comp, but I would bet against it if I had to, because I just think there are things that Randy had whilst that OBJ doesn't.
Yeah, I personally like the comp. Like, you go to Foxborough, you start catching touchdowns, you start winning. So I think the Foxborough move that you're advocating for, Nick, makes a lot of sense. So I appreciate that. Here's the reason why I think it's Odell too, but it's not necessarily about Odell. It's about Baker. Baker's still hurt. The idea that we've sort of like left this narrative train leave the station and we're not talking about it anymore. Baker, we've talked about Baker shutting it down. So I don't know what we're expecting from Baker this weekend, but it's not like all of a sudden just because Odell's father retweeted a video and LeBron jumped on social media to say free Odell, that was some move that healed Baker's labrum and fractured shoulder. I don't think Baker's season at all, Nick, is going to look like what we want it to look like simply because of injuries.
But I want to talk about another part of Baker long term, and I'm going to once again throw a question at Wildes.